So, despite the data that is available, consumer habits changing, moving more towards plant-based alternatives to dairy products, and despite the pledge that the European Parliament themselves made to make the EU climate neutral by 2050, it would appear that the European Parliament have instead arrived at some non-existent data, which seems to suggest that there's been this invisible movement of consumers accidentally buying the wrong products. As of yet, we've seen no evidence of this. We've seen no evidence of it being to anyone's detriment, or there being any justification for taking any formal corrective action and putting the burden of that onto the manufacturers of plant-based alternatives. By this point, you've probably heard about the vote in October of 2020, in which the European Parliament voted yes on the adoption of Amendment 171. I don't know if you necessarily know all of the implications of this amendment. So what are the implications? First of all, for example, oat milk would not be able to call itself oat milk. That's one of the possible implications. It would instead have to call itself some sort of oat beverage or oat liquid. Another implication is that it wouldn't necessarily be able to even be described as an alternative to milk. It would just have to be oat liquid and then stay quiet about what it was aiming to achieve. It would not be able to publish descriptive words even, such as it being milky or creamy. Furthermore, they wouldn't be able to publish any kind of comparative data, such as comparisons to milk products in their climate impact, for example, which would seem heavily contrary to the general narrative of wanting the EU climate to be neutral by 2050. We can't even give people information about the choices they're making. It just seems like an unnecessary obstacle in the way. I don't think anybody accidentally buys plant-based milk because it says that it has a lower carbon footprint than dairy milk does. That's not a widespread enough scenario that needs any kind of legislation to protect people. What's more, labelling something as not containing milk just seems like a very basic level of protecting people with severe allergens. I feel like this is more dangerous. The other implication, which is really wild, is that they might not even be able to use comparable packaging, which if you think about your average milk carton, and then think about your average orange juice carton, I feel like I don't see how the dairy industry have a patent on that. I don't see who's being protected or why. But similarly, if the plant-based community wouldn't be allowed to use words like creamy or milky, then I don't see why they should be allowed to describe their steaks as juicy. Similarly, if we can't say that there's a lower carbon emission associated with these products, then I don't feel like they should be able to use words like 50% less sugar on a yogurt, for example, because, well, someone might accidentally pick that up and think they were buying a sugar cane. That's a plant. We wouldn't want people accidentally buying dairy when they're trying to buy a sugar cane. Good lord, when people buy strawberry milkshake, should they be allowed to call it strawberry milkshake? It doesn't contain strawberries, certainly not usually, certainly not the kind you buy in supermarkets. It doesn't contain strawberry. Flavoured to simulate the taste, but I wouldn't want anyone picking up a bottle of strawberry milkshake thinking they were buying a punnet of strawberries. So I don't even think they should be able to say it's strawberry flavoured, because it's still confusing. It contains the word. They should just call it sweet pink milk liquid. I don't see any other way around it. It's too confusing. In all seriousness, this is a malicious attack. We're in the death throes of a struggling industry that we know is built on abuse, and we ought not be surprised that now, in its final stages, it's acting out and trying to take down the thriving up-and-comer that takes its place. This is, if implemented, this isn't just a matter of inconvenience, this isn't just a matter of getting one over on us. This is expensive. This is very expensive to the plant-based alternative industries. This is people who want to go vegan, who are told that it is too expensive for them, even though that's not the case, now having prices driven up as we have to bend to unnecessary regulations to protect a dying industry that forces this lie, this absolute lie, that the consumer is too incompetent to decide which carton contains milk and which contains a plant-based alternative, but only in the scenario of plant-based alternatives does the consumer demonstrate this level of ignorance. This kind of regulations exists nowhere else to protect food consumers. In fact, the general trend is to promote openness and transparency on food labelling. It would be encourageable to make the consumer as aware as possible of what is and what is not in the product. To say that something does not contain milk, is dairy-free, is necessary to help some people make their choices, and typically it's encouraged. Why then are we not talking about changing the labelling of gluten-free items? What if someone wants to buy a whole load of gluten and they accidentally pick up some gluten-free bread? This is obviously not consistent. And it's through that inconsistency that we see the true motive. It is specifically attacking the plant-based products. The reason for this is to undermine and drive up the expense of plant-based products, and I have no idea where they might have got the impression that they have some sort of a right to types of packaging, but that is ludicrous. That in particular is something that is so obviously bolted onto this movement as a way to drive up the expense, as plant-based alternatives would have to transition towards new packaging. This movement would only create more confusion. We as consumers are adjusted to the availability of plant-based alternatives. They are clearly labelled, they are present, we know where to find them in the stores. This isn't a problem. This is a step back from the progress that we have been making, and we must reject this imposition. We must reject the attempt to crush the industry of alternatives. We must reject handing over power to those who intend to hide choices away from the consumer. We must reject this intentional financial assault. The EU must do better. The EU must recognise the data that we do have, which does not reflect confused consumers crying over good-willed milk. This entire agenda is false and aggressive. It holds back the animals and it holds back people's choices. It serves the benefit to no one but the people who intend to profit through their own sales and profit through the disruption of the alternatives. We cannot allow them to disrupt what we've built. We have developed over time a wonderful variety and availability of plant milks, and that is no less than we deserve as people and for the animals that we care about. One of the simple things that each one of us can do to stand up and to make a difference is through our choices and through our voices. So in our choices we must continue to support the plant-based alternatives and refuse to let it die and to let it be disrupted, and we can use our voices by signing a petition, which I will link below. Oatly and their stunning humour have put together a wonderful infographic explaining everything about what's happened, everything about what this means, the effect that it could have. It's perfectly clear. If you run through the link below, it will have an option for you to sign a petition, which I would encourage you to do. If we want to see a change, we've got to stand up for it, and we've got to say that it's not acceptable. They may take the average consumer for fools, but we won't be fools, and we're not going to let the dairy industry and the European government dictate the future of this movement and the lives of the animals that depend upon it. Please sign the petition and have a wonderful day.